Imagine walking onto a college campus as a student and never really leaving. Not because you stayed the same, but because your role kept evolving from student to professor to someone shaping how real-world systems operate. Welcome to the Marquis Masters podcast. I'm Nick Franck. Today I'm joined by Dr. Dick Larson, who spent more than 5 decades at MIT building a career in operations research that extended far beyond the classroom. From working with the New York Police Department to improve their 911 response systems, to developing blended learning programs alongside his wife, his work has consistently focused on making complex systems more effective and more human. In this episode, he gives me a lesson on what operations research looks like, what it means to dedicate a lifetime to one institution, and how his work has influenced everything from public safety to education. Let's get into it. I'm excited to welcome Dick Larson, a professor post-tenure from MIT, to the Marquis Masters podcast. Dick, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm honored and flattered to be on the show. So thank you very much.
Well, you are one of the more in-depth individuals that I've had the pleasure of chatting with, and I'm hoping I can keep up with what your background is and what your PhD is in, which is operations research. Can you tell me, what does that entail? What is operations research?
Well, I say let's invert the order here. It's research on operations. And by that, I mean, some people think of operations research as anti-submarine warfare from World War II. And a lot of people have a stereotype of that because mathematics and modeling for anti-submarine warfare. But no, operations research goes back in many different dimensions. Queuing theory is a waiting line theory. Both the psychology and the mathematics is a part of operations research. And that goes back to Copenhagen, Denmark in 1919, when telephone switches became involved. So that you didn't have to just call your neighbor and hang a wire. You could call anyone who had a telephone through the centralized switch. Well, sometimes there are too many people calling at the same time, and there were delays. So A.K. Erlang of Denmark invented queuing theory, and it's the mathematics of queuing based on what the demand is, what the service time is, how many servers you have, and Erlang's equations are still the most used equations in queuing theory over 100 years later.
Wow. When you think about this from the modern workplace perspective of the necessity of operations research, what does that look like today?
Well, it can be either formal or informal. Let's look at the formal part. American Airlines is run by a collection of operations researchers. Sometimes operations research is also called management science, but it's basically gathering data, creating a mathematical model of the situation you're doing, put it all on the computer, and analyzing alternative decisions until you optimize your results. And so that's what, for instance, American Airlines does with running the airlines. And these things also work when there's weather delays or, heaven forbid, emergencies on certain runways, like LaGuardia last week. And they can adapt things. And operations research is very much involved in creating the mathematical and decision framework for making those decisions. And so that's on the formal side. On the informal side, I've written a book called, I can plug a book, Model Thinking for Everyday Life, How to Make Better Decisions. And each of us on any day has to make decisions in life. And usually they're routine or small decisions. Sometimes they're big decisions, like who am I going to propose to get married or something, if you're younger than me. That's a big decision. You might even ask, what is the definition of decision? And the one I like, it's an irrevocable allocation of resources. A decision is an irrevocable allocation of resources. So a decision isn't a decision to make a decision. Decision is that allocation of resources. So on a day-to-day basis, for instance, I start each of my day, and on the computer, I type an email to myself, which is my model thinking, my model of the day. And then as each thing is checked off, I go back, I send another email to myself and put 5 asterisks on it and put it in small font. and I can pat myself on the back for having that part of my model thinking done for the day. And of course, during the days, random things can happen, and so I have to change and adjust like that. So we have both the formal model thinking and the informal.
Have you ever wondered how some people's stories live on, not just through their work, but through history itself? For nearly 130 years, Marquis Who's Who has been documenting the lives of leaders, innovators, and changemakers across every profession. From CEOs and scientists to artists and educators, Marquis has captured the stories behind success, the people who define our times. Being listed in Marquis Who's Who isn't just recognition, it's taking control of your personal brand and using it to create a meaningful and impactful legacy. It's a record of your life's work, preserved, published, and accessible to generations who will study, research, and be inspired by your contribution. If you've built something meaningful and you've made an impact in your field or community, this is how you ensure your story is told and your personal brand is maintained accurately with integrity. Visit MarquisWho'sWho.com to learn more about how you or someone you admire can be featured, because history remembers those who take the time to record it.
Okay, I feel like I just got one of your lessons that you would have delivered at MIT, which was great. Like, there's such you can never take the professor out of you, right? I mean, you spent your collegiate careers there. You taught there for 50 plus years. They even created a post-professor, post-tenure title for you. What was it like to be at MIT and still be there for so long?
Well, MIT was perfect for me, and I've been so lucky in life in so many ways. But being in MIT is one of them. First of all, it's a meritocracy. So I always felt as if you worked hard and did things well, you'd be rewarded. I never felt that MIT was at all politically tainted this way or that way, or this way or that way. And it was a meritocracy, and also welcomed people shifting during their careers from one place to another. So during my 50 some odd years at MIT, I've had 5 different academic home departments because my interests changed over time. So that was been very, very good. Of course, the students are wonderful. Faculty are great. The support staff is unsurpassed. And so it's a great place. And as you step up the steps, you walk into MIT, you have a long corridor ahead of you. So MIT is named it the Infinite Corridor.
Did you have the same office? I would like to believe you had more than one office, or were you in the same one for 50 plus years?
No, I had various offices as the Operations Research Center moved. I had my favorite office, but I no longer have that office.
Yeah, I just envision like one office that's just full of stuff from 50 years. Just that would be
all that junk.
Well, I call it knowledge, right? Not junk, knowledge. You talked a little bit about a queuing model, and something that you worked on was a hypercube queuing model.
Yes.
What is that? Can you tell me a little bit about what that is?
Yeah, well, the traditional multi-server queuing models, eventually, as I said, going back to Erlang in Denmark in 1919, are viewed all servers as identical. So we have a clone. Suppose we have 10 operators answering the telephone. It would model those as they are clones of each other. And by clones, I mean statistically the same. So you don't care whether Alice is answering the phone or Alvin is answering the phone, 2 of the 5 people. Whereas the hypercube queuing model has distinguishable servers, which makes it more complicated. So because these are spatially distributed queuing situations for police, fire, and ambulance. So if you go to New York City, for instance, you divide New York City into Manhattan North and Manhattan South. You got 4 other boroughs, and basically the location of the server is just as important as anything else in terms of dispatching it to a 911 call. And so you have to keep track of which servers are free and which are not free. And so the state of the system is now no longer like N for N servers busy. it's a binary number, like 1110, 11100 for, I don't know how many, was that 8? So the ones indicate the servers that are busy and the zeros correspond to the not busy. And the hypercube state space, a vertex on the hypercube is one of those binary numbers. And as you go from busy to idle, one of the ones drops to 0 and you drop down, or one of the zeros goes to 1 as you dispatch another car, you go up. So the hypercube is the state space. And you might say, well, how do you think about hypercube? Think, first of all, of a 2-server queue, which just the hypercube is a square, or think of a 3-server queue, and the hypercube is a 3-dimensional cube, and you can vision that way. And if you can get yourself through a 3-dimensional cube, the generalization to n dimensions is pretty straightforward. He said, the professor says.
Okay. Yeah, I got all of that. I'm ready to write my dissertation on what.
I'm sorry, I'm sounding so much like a professor here.
No, it's great. It is like it's such a pleasure to chat about things that that I don't really know a lot about, and so it's really fun to talk with people about kind of like the passion things that they've worked on. And when you think about things that you've worked on in your life, fun projects, interesting projects. I know you've written a book, you've authored other works that have been published and won awards. Like, what are some of the more fun, interesting projects that you had the pleasure of being a part of?
Well, there are so many. I hate to distinguish any of them, but one of them was teaching a course with Professor Amadeo Odone called Urban Operations Research. And back in the 70s, cities and city problems were becoming a national crisis. And so we decided, hey, let's apply some of the operations research ideas to cities. And we didn't have this book originally. We had nothing. We had it created from whole cloth. And I would go in one day and go to the blackboard and say things. And Odone would be sitting there in the second row wondering, what the heck is Larson going to talk about today? And the next day, I would be sitting in the second row and I'd say, what the heck is Odone going to talk about today? And so in the course of doing this for 2 or 3 years, we created this. And this has become a classic textbook worldwide of operations research applied to cities. It's had about 1,000 citations. So we're very happy with that. Now, I think one thing I was very proud of, you're asking about the projects I've done that I'm interested in, is called Blossoms, all caps, BLOSSOMS. Blended Learning Open Source Science and Math Studies. And you can do a Google search on Blossoms. It'll take you right to the Blossoms webpage. And you might say, well, what is that? Well, my partner in life, not only as my wife, but as my intellectual partner, Mary Elizabeth Murray, or Liz for short, she and I were joined at the hip in so many different dimensions, but one of them was intellectually. So we were intellectual partners. And so we would travel the world together. We actually were in Iran twice, Lebanon once, Pakistan, India. And it was the trip to China that changed things for us. We went to Hong Kong and Beijing. And then we said, well, could you fly us or drive us to a very poor rural community? And so they did. They drove us to a there's no airport there, rural community in the inland China. And there we saw the teacher showing bits of videotapes of lessons created by excellent teachers from Hong Kong or Beijing, and then stopping the videotape and then interacting with the class, and then showing a few more minutes of the videotape, stopping it, and then interacting with the class. And on the flight back to Hong Kong, my wife Liz and I said, what if you actually made videotapes? Or at that time, video was also beginning to go on the internet as not tapes, and it could be delivered that way. What if you actually designed video lessons for high schools and colleges to be interrupted by the class, and you gave instructions for the instructor as to how to handle each break? And so that was the invention of Blossoms. Blended Learning Open Source Science and Math Studies. I think it was the first major open source STEM program in the world that I'm aware of. STEM being science, technology, engineering, and math. And so we started that, and we got some money from the National Science Foundation and from other places, from private foundations, private individuals who could write us a check, not us, but MIT, to support this. And the end result is there are 86 Blossoms lessons that are on science and math. They're now today permanently installed on YouTube, and they're used every day worldwide. So we're very proud of that. So I think the Blossoms thing, and basically my wife Liz was the project manager for Blossoms. So it's really a joint effort.
Yeah. That blended learning, I don't know if I was ever saw any of those, but I know my wife was a teacher as well. And she did a lot of that in her classroom, right? You play a video, then you pause it, you talk about it with your students. I don't know if it was within the same kind of program as that, but I think some offshoots of that have kind of blended into other education.
Yeah. See, we designed these though to be interrupted.
Sure.
So pedagogically, they are to be interrupted. Like, I think your wife might have welcomed that approach a little bit better.
Yeah, she was working with 6-year-olds. So,
Okay.
yeah, I was like, you play 10 seconds of a video or whatever, and it's, then you got to stop and start and things like that. I'm really curious about, when you developed your book about the operations and you did it for a bunch of different cities. When you and your partner were designing the book and writing the book, what were some of the biggest, I don't want to say failures, but what were some like common things that you saw in cities that you're like, okay, you said there was a lot of challenges that were facing cities. What were some of those that you're like, okay, we need some better processes and operations for this?
Yeah, so you were referring to the Urban Operations Research book, which Odoni and I wrote, and see, at the same time, I was teaching at MIT 4 days a week, and the fifth day a week, I was at my consulting company, which had different names over the years. But at its peak, it had 35 full-time employees. And our biggest client was the city of New York. So typically on a Friday, I would fly in what they had called the Eastern Shuttle at that time, and spend the whole day in New York with the police department and with emergency medical services, not so much the fire department. And we got to know the priorities and constraints of both police and emergency medical. And we began creating mathematical models that we would then give away for their use. And so that was good. And I did other things with the New York City Police Department too, because I remember I was still a doctoral student at the time, and I remember 911, which not to be confused with 9/11. 911 is the emergency number now used around the U.S. It used to be in New York City, there were 21 different emergency numbers. One for police, fire, and ambulance, but one for each of the 5 boroughs. And in both Brooklyn and Manhattan, you had to know which section of that borough you were in to call the right number. So that was ridiculous. So they replaced it all by 911. And then I remember I read, and I was still a student at the time, letters to the editor of the New York Times. It said, "Dear editor, I called the mayor's new 911 number last Saturday at 8 o'clock. I let it ring for 28 minutes and they got no answer. I thought I must have dialed the wrong number. So I hung up, I dialed again. And after 25 minutes, police emergency, may I help you?" And so it was clear that the 911 system wasn't operating correctly. And if you have a 25 or 28 minute delay, people can be killed in that time. Or if it's a medical emergency, bleed out and bleed to death. You really need fast response. So I volunteered my time, and I went down there and introduced myself. And I said, "Can I live in the department for a month?" And 2 sergeants and I worked together down in the 911 dispatching office. And I figured out what was wrong and how to fix it. And it was all based on data and things. So again, remember, I'm here now. I was about 25 years old. So they didn't really respect somebody who they viewed as just almost still a teenager. So I presented this to the head of the department, police department, the commissioner, and I had charts with different colors, and I had all the each 24 hours. I had Saturdays and Fridays and whatever, and I showed why these delays were like this. And I talked for about 2 or 3 minutes, and remember the charts were different colors. And so the commissioner stops me and said, "What's your name, Larson?" He said, "Those charts you're showing me, they're all lies. My staff says there is no problem, and those letters to the editors are lies. Sergeants, what's the truth here?" These are the two sergeants I was working with, and they kind of gulped. They said, "Sir, everything that Mr. Larson has shown you is true." And boy, he sat up straight, started taking notes, and within 7 days of that presentation, every one of my recommendations were implemented in their entirety in the New York City Police Department. That's the fastest implementation ever in my whole career.
I think in any business ever. 1 week?
Yeah.
That was
well, because, people could be dying as a result of this long delays.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Math, data, analytics. It solves so much.
It does. It does.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about your wife and your partner and how she was your intellectual kind of counterpart. When you think back of your career and your life with her, how much of a role did her and the rest of your family play in your career and in your success?
Well, she played a huge role because, as I said, we were joined at the hip. So we traveled the world together, all those different places. And I'll never forget. And so 50% of the time when one of us is giving a presentation, it would be her. We were interchangeable in terms of making a presentation. I'll never forget the time we're in Saudi Arabia, and she's up there on stage in a dress, but she has her hair covered, giving a lecture to 400 men. And I was so proud of her because that must have been very intimidating. But she didn't let it faze her. And yeah, so we went to all these different places together and talking about open education. And, a lot of what we started is still being used today.
I love that. When you're not at MIT, which has been a large part of your life, what do you do outside of that? What are you doing outside of work?
Well, now I'm retired, so that's good. So every day is a holiday. May West, every day is a holiday. But I like to exercise. I used to, when I was younger, I would jog 3 miles a day with 1 or 2 golden retrievers. But my lower back doesn't want that anymore. So I walk 10,000 steps a day, which is about 3.5 miles. I try to do that no matter what the weather is. And I used to go with my golden retriever, but unfortunately, my golden retriever, Maisie, who's in the next room, because I didn't want to have an interruption here. She's my 3-legged miracle. We had to amputate her front right leg because she had severe bone cancer there.
No.
So she can't go on long walks anymore. The longest walk she can do out is just go around the perimeter of the house outside on a leash with me and then come back in. So walking is one thing. And I like to explore different parts of this part of Massachusetts. There's so much history here. If you just, walk down what used to be a train track area, which is now the Minuteman walkway or bikeway. It's amazing what you can find along there if you walk for miles. Like I say, it used to be railroad tracks. Well, there's a point of it here about 2 miles from here that the railroad tracks are still there, off on the side where there used to be a siding. The actual railroad tracks is still there. I have photographs of them. And I love that part of eastern Massachusetts. There's so much history here. So if you walk and walk and walk, find other places you haven't been to before, you're likely to find other artifacts like that. Who knows what's buried in the backyard here?
Oh, I bet if you got a couple metal detectors out there, I'm sure you would find so much history. It's a place my wife and I are planning to go to at some point because she's a huge history buff, and just that whole northeast part of the country is something her and I have not necessarily explored as much together. But it's on our list.
Yeah, well, that's good.
Mm-hmm.
If you get up to here also, but make sure to visit Vermont and New Hampshire as well.
Mm-hmm. Just those. Oh, of course, I've got to go during the fall, right? When it's all the leaves are changing and it's during.
Yeah, that's the best. That's the best way.
Mhm.
Yeah, yeah,
That's when everyone else also wants to be there.
yeah. So go in May when the leaves are coming out. That's also beautiful.
The spring. That's right.
Yeah.
You've been in your community for a really long time, and for you, like, how important is that for you to invest and give back or to your community, and how have you done that over the course of your lifetime?
Well, I kind of, even though I live in Lexington, I view my dominant community as MIT, because they're the ones who have facilitated my career and my life and given me a salary and whatever. So fairly recently, I gave them a fully funded faculty chair, millions of dollars worth of that. So there's a Richard Larson chair in the MIT Institute for Data Systems and Society, and I'm not aware of any other faculty member who's done that. But anyway, I did that, and I think that's a big give back.
Yeah, I love that. When you think back over the course of your career and you're back to your 17, 18, 19-year-old self and you're kind of plotting out your life and your career, if you could go back, do you think you would tell that young Dick to keep following the same path, or is there anything you think you would have done differently?
Well, I was very lucky to have mentors. As an undergraduate, I was at a fraternity house, which was not a national one; it was a local one, and it had been at MIT almost as long as MIT had existed. And there, when I was a freshman, I had two upperclassmen as roommates. We had 2 rooms, study room and bunk beds in the sleeping room, and they showed me what it was like to mentor and support somebody. So it helped me a lot, and then I kind of remembered I should do that myself. And yeah, so basically, in my career, I've tried to mentor students, and I've tried to mentor others. And I don't know if I've actually got onto your question. So restate your question.
Oh, I mean, it just seems like, is there anything, if you went back to your younger self, like, do you think you would have made all the same choices to get where you are today? Is there any decision at some point? Was there a fork in the road where you could have gone this, but you went this?
When I say lucky, when there were forks in the road, I had people in my life that had just come into my life who were just the right people for me. And they helped me figure out, do I turn right, turn left, or go straight ahead? And I think all those decisions, I would not change any one of those decisions.
Yeah, I love that.
And I want to include my faculty advisor, Alvin Drake, and Philip M. Morse, who was the physicist head of the Operations Research Center when I was a student. And that shows that physics and operations research are the same thing. So operations research is the physics of the day-to-day life that we live in.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So
all these people really helped me.
Yeah. Is there a life lesson that either one of your mentors or any of your mentors gave to you that has stuck with you throughout your life?
Well, my wife was also a mentor. And I'll give you an example. When the 2019 COVID 2-year break started, and we had to stay home or whatever, go to the office. And I said to her, I said, well, my nickname is Dr. Q. I probably should sit down and write a book on queuing. And she said, don't do that. You've been there, done that. You have nothing new to say about queuing. Then she said, think hard about what your passion is and think for several days about it. And then from that, you'll find out something that's other than queuing, and you'll make a new contribution to the world. And as a result of that conversation with her, that's when this came around. This book would not exist if she hadn't pointed at me and said, no, don't write a book on queuing. And then I realized after 3 days that this is my passion. Model thinking for everybody. So spread the word. You write it in a way which is full of pictures and non-equations, no theorems and proofs. and basically nice reasoning for everybody.
Yeah. What is your process for writing? Like, is it something that you're just like, are you someone who can just kind of throw it all on the page and you can get all your ideas out? Like, you've obviously written a bunch. Like, what is your process like?
Well, it depends on what it is. Like for the book model thinking, I'd come up with an outline of, first of all, the chapters, how many chapters and their names, and then I go make it outline a little bit more detailed. What are the various subsections in the chapters, and then we just start writing. And sometimes I write on pencil and paper, and sometimes I type into the computer. I've read some research that says if you write yourself on a pencil and paper, your brain remembers it and understands it much more deeply. And also the brain's giving you signals about what to write. Whereas on the computer, you have this technology in between you and your brain in this process. So oftentimes I'll write it, and then if it's part of a chapter, and then eventually I'll type it onto the computer or have somebody do it for me.
I have also found that disconnect when you're typing something and absorbing it versus writing it down. It's such an interesting, thing, right? Where it's like, I do always find like I've got a notebook off to the side where I have to write down everything I have to do for that day. And it's like, I know I can do it on my computer. I know there are things on the computer, but I just absorb it better when it's on my notepad over here rather than if it's on a sticky note on my laptop or something.
Well, I told you what I do with my laptop. Every morning with a cup of coffee, I type my agenda for the day, and it's an email to myself.
Right.
And I keep emailing myself all day long and patting myself as I cross one off after another. We each have a different system. Whatever works. Whatever works.
Whatever works for us. Dr. Larson, before I let you go, what does being a Marquis Who's Who listee mean to you?
Well, I'm just honored to that you invited me, that we've had this conversation, and to be in the world's best place. I mean, there's nothing better than being in Who's Who, Marquis Who's Who. So I'm flattered and honored, and I thank you for inviting me to this.
Awesome. Well, it was so great to chat with you today. I definitely learned something, and I hope you have a great rest of your afternoon.
Okay, and you too. Take care.
If this conversation gave you a new perspective on how data, systems, and decision-making all come together, consider sharing it with someone else who's interested in analytics, operations, or problem-solving at a deeper level. If you'd like to hear more conversations with leaders and innovators like Dick Larson, be sure to visit marquiswhoswho.com and subscribe to the Marquis Masters podcast wherever you're listening. Once again, thank you so much to Dr. Dick Larson for joining me. I'm Nick Franck, and we'll catch you for the next Marquis Masters podcast.